everyone, this is Kimberly Swanner with KimandCaboodle.com and VisArts Center in Rockville, Maryland. And today we are going to talk about test tiles and why they are so important. So I recently filmed a video on dip glazing, and I'm preparing to make a video on hand brushing glazes. But in between those, actually very important for you all to know how to make what kind of test tiles work, and you know, all that good stuff, and what are the benefits of test tiles. So I've got a bunch of stuff I actually teach. Wow, words. I actually teach a how to do running glazes class at VisArts on occasion, and running glazes, you know, glazes like to run sometimes, and that's how you get some really great blenders and neat colors, but it's also a way to really royally mess up your kiln. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some glaze problems and how to prevent them. And in lieu of all of this, it involves test tiles. So test tiles are great things. The word test, it's testing your glazes so that you don't use your number one best piece on glazes you're not familiar with. So example is this is a really great marbled mug that I was making or made, and I was really certain, felt really positive about the glaze, knew that the glaze on the inside, what it was going to do, and I should have known better that the glaze on the outside, I only put 2 coats, which with brushing on, but still this glaze in particular is a running glaze, and it decided to run all the way down underneath this handle and subsequently down onto the kiln shelf, which we do not want. That's what running glazes are kind of known for. Handles in particular are really sensitive to running glazes. You want to be very careful with how you apply glazes on handles, because the heat is able to bounce around a lot differently than it does in your piece and around your piece. And so your handles actually get hotter faster, which causes the glaze to really go to town. So be aware that when you are glazing handles, one, that you're not using a running glaze, and if you are using a running glaze, that you are only putting it on the very top and not the full extent of the handle. Because this is one common glaze problem, is that you have not tested your glaze, or you don't know how much glaze you really have put on. That's kind of, you know, sometimes between dipping or brushing or using a new glaze, you know, it's unsure what the you know, run speed or ability of your glaze is going to be, or maybe your kiln overfired by accident. It happens. But having a piece run so much that it touches your kiln shelf, one, it can ruin your piece. 2, it can ruin your kiln shelf, and then you've got a lot of work ahead of you that you really didn't want to have to do. A big extreme example, this is kind of what it looks like. We're going to talk about this little guy here in a minute, but this is kind of what that looks like. You can see how the drippies go all the way down the sides here with a runner. And when you have it on a kiln shelf, this has the lovely glaze issues sign on it, and you can see just how all these chunks came out of this piece. And those chunks stayed in the kiln shelf, and we had to take a hammer and a chisel and do everything we could to get this piece to be removed from the kiln shelf. And unfortunately, that can end up breaking your kiln shelf. So $75 worth of kiln shelf can be kind of gone to waste just due to, you know, not really testing your glazes or not paying attention to what glazes you've put on and what order and what they do. So that's one glaze problem that you can encounter with glazing. Another glaze problem is bubbling. So I'm going to try and get this up really close, and you can see all those little streaks of those bubbles. Now, bubbles can be caused by a whole lot of different things. It can just be a chemical reaction between the 2 glazes. One glaze cannot like the other, and it happens. Another can be that the glaze is too thick, and it just, you know, fired in such a way that when it's cooling, the bubbles stay instead of completely melting back into your piece. So these are not food safe at all. It wouldn't probably, if I was to push my thumb into some of these with a little bit of effort, it's going to cause some bursts of the bubble, and then it becomes super sharp and can cut you. Sure, I could go through the trouble of grinding them all down, maybe try to reglaze it, but when it's to this kind of extreme, it's not really, in my opinion, worth it. This is kind of one of those chalk it up to you learning something. And then the inside of this bowl, you can see little flickers of color and little indentions. This is pinholing. And pinholes, same kind of thing, is that, you know, as the glaze is cooling in the kiln from being molten, it doesn't quite cool correctly, and it creates little divots in your piece. And they, sometimes not all pinholing is bad in terms of like your piece can still be food safe, but some of them are deep enough that they are not, so you can't clean out of them properly. Really also, sometimes pinholing can show that your piece, the glazes you chose, are not food safe chemically. So even though you might have a chemical safe glaze that says it's food safe, if it has a bad reaction in the kiln, you want to go ahead and do a test on it. So either using some vinegar or a lemon slice, setting that in there overnight, and then picking it up the next day and checking to see if there's residue left behind that cannot be washed off. That is one way of showing that your piece is not food safe. There's plenty others. Search the internet, Google. I have yet to have an instance of like, hey, oh crud, this is not food safe. So that's, find that out on your own, because unfortunately I'm just, I haven't had to visit that yet for myself. But there's also one more, and you can kind of see it. Actually, I'll bring this piece back. You can kind of see these little white speckles here, where that's actually the raw clay body there. And that has happened when you have too much water, either in your glaze or in your piece. Overhydration can cause a problem of the glaze just kind of moving downwards and sloughing off. So it's vitrified, it's finished, it can be reglazed, refired, but unfortunately there's no glaze on these particular areas because the glaze could not absorb into the piece. So sometimes you can throw a piece too thin, and that alone can cause the glaze to not be able to soak in properly. So there's a lot of different reasons why your glaze will not stick to your piece. An example I do not have here is actually shivering, which is when your piece comes out of the kiln and the glaze is actually just peeling off in little sheets. All of the problems I've talked about so far, they can be technically refired or sanded and taken care of. Shivering, there's no fixing for that. Shivering, your glaze is peeling off. There's some chemical imbalance either in the glaze, between the glaze actually, and your piece and the clay body. And so something happened, what it is, like, I've had glazes that on clay bodies where it's the same glaze and the same clay body and they're fine, and then the next day I come out with I've only had like 3 instances of shivering on my pieces personally, and it just is not food safe. You can't peel the glaze off and reglaze, refire. It's just a really not fun chemical imbalance between your glaze and the piece, and there's just no fixing it. It looks really cool though if you get it to happen like in a really neat way. I've got a piece at home actually that it's shivered all on the inside, and it's just gorgeous, and like I feel bad, it's so delicate now, like there's nothing you could do with it, but just really pretty. But like to get that to happen on purpose is like, I don't know. Anyways, those are the things that can happen with glazes that are not good. Those are the things you don't want to see when you have a piece come out of a kiln. So in order to see like, oh, will this happen to my glaze? Did I mix my glaze properly? Did I layer it properly? What did I do? Please use test tiles. Test tiles can be little pieces of clay that you have, just made a slab and then angled the slab so it can stand up like this. And you can add grooves into it or not. It's your choice. The grooves allow you to see how does the glaze break when it moves across your piece. So like these 3 guys here, these were tests I did of 2 glazes at VisArts many months ago. I think it was maybe even last year. I don't know. It doesn't matter when I did them. What matters is that I have them. I'm just putting them in order here. Because you can see I've got 3 tiles. And so what I was testing here is how far does one glaze run over another? Because some people were finding that the glaze was running like crazy, and other people were finding that it wasn't running at all. So I wanted to, show like, okay, well, I know how I glaze, and I know what consistency I like in my glazes when I'm glazing. So what would my 3 test tiles look like depending on how far I took the glaze? So these glazes were a teal and an emerald green, and both of them together in our studio like to run. And so I layered them. I put little marks on the side using underglaze. Highly recommend marking if you're doing multiple layers of glazes. Where's your first layer? Where's your second layer? So my first layer goes all the way down to the bottom line. Second layer goes to the top line. And then I wanted to see how far do these get pushed down. So in this particular first tile where there's, you know, they're very close to each other, then what happened is that they just came, you know, we had a little bit of a push right here. So the first layer of glaze, hopefully you all can see this. You know, again, I can't predict what you can all see and what I'm seeing, but this first layer here, this is where the glaze stopped, and it actually pushed down almost a ½ inch to the bottom of the teal glaze that I used. But you can still see some of that teal remaining. So it means that, you know, with this little bit of glaze up at the top, it pushed down a ½ inch. So when I'm, you know, going to prepare my piece, you know, how much of my bottom can I have showing? How much of this color do I want to show? Do I want the glazes to meet up exactly at the bottom? You know, those are things that you can figure out by, you know, doing these test tiles. So this test tile, the teal went down farther, but it's the same emerald dip. And again, we got that ½ inch there. But on the other side where it's completely smooth, so where the ridges are, the glaze stopped, but on the other side where it's completely smooth, it ran almost all the way down to my mark. So that's another thing to keep in mind is like, oh, you know, that's what it happens, you know, when you're glazing, any sort of ridges are gonna slow down the speed of a run, and any sort of smoothness is going to encourage the run to keep going. So this one is the same thing. The teal goes all the way to the bottom here, and the emerald is still the same, so it stopped right at that little mark where the little bumps are, but on the other side ran halfway down. So we're getting about a ½ inch run consistently, except for this one. I may have gotten a little bit extra on this one. This is about an inch run. So we're getting, though, pretty consistent results through all of these tiles on the back side. So, and this is really neat because there was no glaze here. This actually pushed onto the clay body itself. So that's, you know, good to know that, you know, okay, well, I'm going to take my glaze all the way down to the bottom. What does that mean for the other glaze I'm putting on top? And again, like some layering things run, some layering things don't. That's why test tiles are so great, so that you can see what does one color look like on top of another, and does it run or not? If I add a third color, what does that do? That's, you know, the magic of test tiles, is that you learn all of these great things just by making a little L-shaped tile that you're going to bisque fire and, you know, have on hand. You can even write on the bottom, you know, I use this glaze first, this glaze second. You know, mark your sides so that you know where different layers go. Really important, because glazes can be different depending on what order you put them in. So these are the exact same glazes, but they're reversed. So this one was the Celadon first with the white on top. You get some really great crystallized speckles here, really pretty. Really enjoy this combination personally. It looks really good on the inside too. Don't get a whole lot of running. The white is pretty solid glaze. You don't get a whole lot of running with this one. However, different story when you reverse them. When you reverse them, you've got the white here and then the Celadon on top, and the Celadon really likes to go for it. It gave a good run here, and really pretty run. Even more so, this is the white first and the Celadon second, and this has a third glaze that pushes even further. So this pushed things even more by adding that third, we call it, this is the texture plum, I think. I'm not sure what we call it here at VisArts, but it's a plum glaze all these glazes are made here at VisArts that I'm showing currently. So, you know, these are just really great ways to show, you know, different methods of, and I don't even know if this is in camera view, honestly. So like, you know, really great ways to show how these different glazes react to each other, and how glazes that are, you know, in the same, you know, how the order, it just, all you're doing is changing the order, but the glazes between three pieces are the same. You know, what does that mean? And so extra cups that you're like, oh, I'm not really going to give this to anybody, that's a great test tile. You can even break them and have them in halves. This is another such test tile. This is a cup I cut in half. So on one side, I believe I did one type of glaze. These are Amico glazes now. So I'm not remembering, I think it's seaweed maybe, I'm not remembering, or it's Jasper, ancient Jasper. It's one of those glazes, I'm not really concerned, but the important part is showing the running. But it's blue rutile, Amico's blue rutile. with the ancient Jasper, I believe, and you can see how one little drip happened. And then on the other side, it's the Smoky Merlot with the ancient Jasper. And I am not 100% certain. Oh, what am I doing? I made marks because I thought ahead of time. So thank you, Pastor Kim. So you can see that the ancient Jasper went down to here, and the other colors went all the way down. So we got really a big run. Like we're looking at an 1.5 to 2 inch run on these. So, you know, test tiles are great, and they will save your kiln and your pieces a whole lot of trouble. And it'll save you a lot of money because, like, let's say I don't particularly like this combination. I don't have to use it. I tested it, and I can try something else that I like with another glaze, or the same glaze with some other application. That's why test tiles are so fantastic. This is one studio glaze that was made, and then 2 commercial glazes that I bought. I don't quite remember the name of this one, but it's a Coyote Glaze. And I think this is in the middle, the Coyote Red Gold. I love Red Gold. It's a great running glaze. And so the Red Gold actually kind of drizzled across in a straight line here where the 2 meet, and it pushed down, like in some spots, over 2 inches, other parts 1 inch, other parts 1/2 inch. So like really unpredictable in terms of how this went, which is why I gave a lot of clearance here at the bottom, especially because this is a smooth pot. So again, like test tiles are great so that you're not, you know, messing up your stuff that you really like. If you are testing, going back to this guy, if you are testing glazes, or if you feel like you have a glaze that's been well tested and you're just not sure if it's going to run or not. So like in this particular instance, I knew I put a lot of glaze on this, but I wasn't sure how much it was going to run. So I put a little dish underneath. You can call them cookies, drip trays, the technical term, but they will protect your kiln shelf. And presuming you don't, you know, get a bad run, then they're reusable, especially if you put kiln wash on them. Kiln wash, I might make a how to make kiln wash video. You have to buy stuff from a ceramics store or retailer in order to make kiln wash. But you don't need kiln wash other than like it just, you know, adds a little bit layer of protection to your cookies or your drip trays. Now you do need kiln wash for your kiln shelves, but because these are just drip trays, I don't really care that these get messed up. If we can reuse them, that's awesome. If we can't, no big deal. But these are fantastic for, you know, if you're worried that, you know, whatever you have is going to run and drip all over the place. So you can put any number of test tiles on your drip tray, and that's going to save you a lot of pain later if you indeed have a big run like this. So this does not have kiln wash on the inside. I don't think it would have mattered if this had kiln wash on the inside. Like this is fused. Like I could bang this up against the table and maybe get it to break loose, but this drip tray is done and this cup is done. There's no saving either of them. But it's really great that, you know, now I don't have to worry about it. Like these are things I don't, you know, they're great examples for, oh, this clearly ran too much and I need to be aware of that. But I'm not worried, you know, I haven't messed up my kiln shelf and, you know, I just throw another piece and not use that glaze again. Another great way to, you know, another great reason for test tiles is, so in these are kind of test tiles for me. So this drippy glaze that did not do so well on this pot, it's the same glaze on this one, and it did just fine on this one. Gorgeous outcome in my opinion. Really pretty color transitions. But just, yeah, like it did not like this teal glaze, but it did like the white. It also, you know, did something completely different on the clear. So test tiles, fantastic things, you know, allows you to see, you know, what's going to happen on the inside versus the outside of something. You know, am I going to end up with, you know, glaze problems between a certain combination or not? Am I going to like it? And keep in mind that your tiles are just small indicators that, you know, this small tile is great to show me what does this glaze do in this small setting, but I don't know really what's going to happen if I throw this on a big bowl. So the bigger your project is going to be with your glazes, the bigger you want your test tiles to be. And keep in mind that if you are dipping your tiles, then you need to dip your final piece to get a similar result. So if you're not dipping your tiles, or let's say your piece is too big to dip in a bucket, you have to brush it by hand, then please brush your test tiles by hand to get the same result. Because I've had a mistake where I made a test tile and it was gorgeous, and then I had a big like 14-pound clay bowl that I had made. And of course I can't dip that. We don't have any containers here big enough to dip glaze, that kind of thing. So I'm brushing the glaze on. Completely different results because my tile was dipped and my bowl was brushed. And the bowl just came out a disaster. It was terrible. And then upon refiring it, you know, the heat, cold shock transition of the refire and the amount of glaze that, you know, was now on the piece ended up breaking the bowl, which is frequent for large pieces, like large plates, large bowls. They really only like to be in one fire, two if you're lucky, but really like one fire is enough for a big piece like that. And so like that sucked, but it happens. And so that's just the reality of it. So make sure that when you're making your test tiles that you're being consistent, dipping test tiles for pieces that you plan to dip and brushing on test tiles that you are planning to brush on. But I hope that this was educational for you, and if not, at least mildly entertaining, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, bye.